Hello. I wanted to make a video to go over the rigging system I've been working on with a friend of mine for like maybe about a year or so. Just on and off. This is not a finished product at all. Um, the the main goal of it is to pretty much remove the need for build scripts when you rig something. I want the rigging workflow to just be tool based, if that makes sense, to just work with the software to help you build your rigs. And the second design pillar of that is that even though what I'm going to show you right now is in Maya, this is not a Maya rigging system. It's at its core, it's a purely Python library that just describes a node graph, as you will see in a minute. And that node graph it's just a description of what the rig is. It's going to make a bit more sense just in a minute. But that node graph can be interpreted in Maya, like I'm doing at the moment. But it can also be interpreted in Blender, in Houdini, or like Unreal, or whatever software you use that has a Python interpreter built in. You could, in theory, make a client for that rigging system. So I'm going to just show you some basic examples of what it can do. And I have both the Orodruin editor. Orodruin is the name of that rigging system, and I probably choose the worst name I could because this is a very hard name to pronounce for a French person. And on the right side, I have Maya's node editor because creating some things in Orodruin will create some stuff in Maya as well. So let's just start simple and just create an add node. It created that node on this side, and on Maya's side, it made a plus minus average. So you will see that the attributes on the nodes are not the same. We have just input 1 and 2 and an output attribute on this side, and this has, well, what Maya would have, right? So a multi-attribute over here, and just an output here, and then a bunch of outputs and inputs we don't use. Because it's meant as a DCC agnostic library, we took the decision of really not trying to match what Maya was doing at all. So we went with what seemed the more like sensible. And we kind of remap like this output. We know that we want that to be mapped to this attribute in Maya. So we just have that mapping in the Maya side implementation. And if I connect those attributes over here, it creates the connection in Maya. So it does what you would expect. If I connect it twice, it connects to the second input. And since those nodes don't have like a third input, we will never get to that attribute in Maya. So that works fine. If you wanted to use do some vector math, for example, and use these attributes over here, we have some vector subtract, vector add, and all of these create plus minus average nodes, as you can see with the names over here. If I switch back to displaying the name of the nodes, and show you maybe the attribute editor. So if I select the add node, it's set to sum. If I select the subtract, it's set to subtract. So yeah, the mapping of the Orodruin nodes don't just map to a node in Maya. They kind of run a build function. The build function is very, very simple. In this case, it just creates one node and sets the attribute to subtract, and that's about it. So again, when I since these are vector operations, they have vector nodes, attributes over here. So it's not really clear from the interface, but you can double click on those and see their content. You can see that it's a vector by the color of it. This is, I think, a float, or maybe just a numeric value. I can connect, again, that up. It connects the output 3 to the input 3D. If I disconnect that and maybe just connect this like that, it's going to connect the individual values like you would expect. So that's all fine and dandy, but so far it's a very basic wrapper over Maya's node system, which would be nice. Like if we were to take the time to make this node editor more user-friendly than Maya's, it might just be good enough, but it goes further than that, in the sense that you can group nodes together. So I'll just delete those and I'll make a node that doubles the value of something. I'll pick that node because it has a nice name. And I'm just going to create those two nodes on the side as just dummy nodes that I just need those nodes to connect to something to that. So these nodes will take one single value and connect it to both its inputs, and then we don't really need that connection. If I hit Ctrl G, it groups that node into another node that just has one input attribute and one output. This is named output because it takes its name from this attribute over here. And it's output 1 because this attribute existed first and then this one was named. I could rename it. We have support for that, but it's not implemented on Maya's end, so this attribute would keep its output 1 name, so it's going to break some stuff, so I'm just going to ignore that. You can see on Maya's end, first of all, I can just double click on that blue band over here and then jump inside of the node. The graphing of the node is a bit awkward so far, but yeah, as you can see over here, I have the path of the node I'm in right now. So in the beginning, I was in the root of the node of the graph. Then when I go and double click on that node, I go inside of it, and I can see its content. You can see in Maya, these nodes are network nodes. They are meant to just display the inputs and outputs of a group node. Because Maya doesn't really support grouping nodes. I guess you could do that with assets. I've never used those, and I've heard they were kind of awkward. But I feel like just having these network nodes leave you with a clear graph, right? You don't have any black box or anything anywhere. You just have nodes that delimitate the entry of a node and its output. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I could rename that node to double, which has renamed those input and output nodes over here. I can export that node, which just saved it to the disk and is now available in the library of nodes that I have over here. So now that I've met that node and saved it, I can create it again. And it created it and created the graph for it. And hopefully you can start to see where I'm going with this. The goal of Orodruin is really to start building components, more and more complex components. You get those low-level building blocks, and then you just like grow your library with more and more complex components. I am going to try and delete all that. It might crash. It didn't. And see. And a good example of a more complex node is that rig IK node. This is just a prototype that I've done to create an IK setup. this leverages Maya's Maya 2020's features. So as you can see in my hierarchy, I just have some guides, some controls, and some joints. I have no IK handle. I have no like transforms driving the rest position of the controls, all that kind of stuff. So it makes for a very clean outlay now. Over here, it created that rig IK node, which has no attributes because it's just a group that contains stuff, but nothing is connected to its input or output nodes. So yeah, it's just a graph. It has 3 joints over here, which are parented together with those attributes, which when I could do, it's going to break a bit, but if I disconnect that, it's going to unparent that last joint. Oh, it didn't actually break all that much. And if I reparent it, now it did. Yeah, because parenting it kept its transformer, I imagine. Yes, so that value was set automatically by Maya, which I don't want. So that's about it for that. This rig IK node in which I am right now, so this node, if I go inside of it, I get to that level, which you can see over here. And it has this 2-bone rest solver node. Is just a node that the editor is still very slow. It's definitely more of a prototype than a product ready for production. This 2-bones rest solver is also a group node, so if I go inside of it, it has its own network that's only responsible for solving the rest matrix of the joints. So we'll show how that component works and ignore those errors. They don't exist. They can't hurt you. So I just created a layer to add these locators in, just so that they are more visible, and I'll do the same for the controls. So in yellow are the controls, and in red are the locators, which are the guides that drive the rest position of the joints. So moving those guides, it's not very clear right now. Let me show the local rotation axis. Right, so if I move the guides, if you have a look at maybe this joint over here, you will see that the orientation of the joint is updated for you. You don't have to do anything. No matter how you move that, it just keeps its orientation as you'd expect. Like, it creates just a plane from these 3 joints and orients them accordingly, which is very nice. It moves the controls for you as well in the right position. The pole vector should be further away. I just haven't implemented the logic to push it back, so I've just snapped it to the joint so far. But yeah, on top of just being able to move the controls around, the rig also actually works, right? I can move the controls, and the IK setup works. I won't go too much into depth, but that IK is built with an expression node and some aim constraints, like using the new aim nodes in Maya that you can see over here. So yeah, that's set up so far, and since I can edit the rest position of those joints and control of that component, let's say, I can do that even when the rig isn't in its default position. So right now the arm is straightened. I can move the elbow back, which will lengthen the arm. And so if I do that, I start to update how the rig behaves based on that position. And if I reset that control back, you can see that now the arm is much longer. So let's test that setup in a more real world application and just grab the content browser and open up that humane body over here. So I've got that guy. I will use Maya's snap to projected center option over here and just place the guides. You don't really want to move any of those when you want to fit the rig to the character. Just use the guides and fit them over here. And yep, I don't really want to do that. Oh, it actually works better than it used to. Nice. Cool. It used to project not through just the first point it meets on the mesh. It used to project also down the whole geometry, so that would have landed over here. But yeah, so I've placed that elbow just roughly. We'll see about making a better fit for that. If I grab the controls and make them bigger, just so that they stick out of the mesh, and same for the locators. Let's do 10. Cool. I can go back in that mode, maybe show the joints, and that rig just disable the snapping. The rig still works, right? It's a bit weird because that pull vector needs to be back. But yeah, the IK works. It's all fine. And let's just create a root joint so that we can skin the arm. So in the Orodruin graph, I will create a joint over here and set the base joint, which is the shoulder in this case, to be a child of the root, just by creating that connection. And then I'm going to rename that root, which renamed that properly. The joints have kept their position just nicely, which is good. I just closed the editor, which might be a problem because I don't know if I can reopen it properly, and keeping reference to that graph. Hopefully we don't need that. But yeah, I wanted to just start skinning that character, so let's just bind skin. That all looks good, I won't remove any used inferences because I think it's doing some things I don't want. Colorize, I don't want that. Let's just... yeah, but I'm not here to make some nice skin weights. If I move that now, I have... let's move that back again. Okay, so let's just smooth the skin weights. I have NG skin tools that I use for that. The end joint for some reason wasn't bound to anything, so it doesn't do anything over here. It should have like got the hand, which I'll just update quickly. I want to add... if you're wondering why the color shows as gray and not white, it's because of the AC's color correction, which I'll turn off for now. Good. I don't actually know if that control drives the joint. Yeah, it doesn't. So that work wasn't really useful. But anyway, let's just smooth out the skin. Just paint, going smooth. That looks about right. And I'll just smooth everything out a bunch. Just... yeah, again, not looking to do any clean skinning. So I have that. I can set that back to color corrected. It deforms perfectly, and I'm happy with it. But if I move those guides, it moves the character, which isn't really what you want in that case. You want those guides to be used to update the rest position of the joints and consequently the bind pose of the skin cluster. So let's fix that. I'm going to do that in Maya, Maya's node graph, because I don't have access to the skin cluster in Orodruin. So I'm just going to take the output of the two-bone rest solver, and which has a bunch of attributes that are going to be very useful, and the skin cluster. So I'm just going to get those two guys over here. And actually, I'm also going to grab the joints. Cool. So yeah, what I'm going to do, and if you don't know about what the bind prematrix is it's the attributes on the skin cluster that describe the bind pose, or like the bind pose of the joints. It's actually the inverse of that bind pose. So we have that information over here. I'm a bit confused as to why these names are not. Let's hope this works, but I feel like I've broken something. Inverse matrix APC. Alright. So the C1, I don't know why they exist. That's a bug somewhere in the editor. But I don't need to use those, I will use those. Okay. So we don't actually care about the root joint because we don't move it. The base joint is plugged into the matrix 1 attribute. So I want to plug its inverse matrix, which is its inverse world matrix in this case, to the bind prematrix. And I'm going to have a look at Maya. If anything moves here while I connect things, it means something's broken. But hopefully everything will be alright. And that moved. Okay. The orientation of that joint isn't what I would expect. Yes, okay, so Maya at some point did more than that. So what I'm guessing here is that the rest pose, and I can check that very easily by just creating a new joint. The rest pose isn't really matching what the final pose of the joint is. So if I take that world matrix and feed it into the offset parent matrix of that joint, and reset the joint orient, okay, so it is looking right. If I use that one, yeah, no, it's broken because that one is. Maybe the setup that goes into that inverse matrix isn't right, which is definitely possible. Sorry, I didn't mean to do a bit of debugging in that. You know what? I won't do any debugging in that, and I will use the world matrix over here and just inverse it. So right here, and yeah, so it means my setup that feeds into that specific attribute is a bit broken, but let's happily ignore that and continue on. So now if I move my rest locators, my guides, it doesn't move the rig, the character at all, but I can still like move that control and the deformation follows, and yeah, it does what I would expect. The rig does continue to work. And what that lets you do is, well, update the rest position of the joints, even as that the character is posed. So right now, I could, I'm not happy with that mushy elbow, for example. I could just, and I will show the shape origin of that character in its object display. Just uncheck that, and it will show the rest position of the mesh, which makes it a bit easier to just move locators around in that. So if I just move that back now, and you are going to see over here that I start to get a much stronger elbow shape over here, and if I move it forward, I get that very, very mushy angle. So it's a very nice way of just editing the way the rig is, like the joint position of your characters, even with a working rig. So you could just work on your skin weights and just realize that, oh, I can't really get the best of the deformation because the joint is just slightly off, and that doesn't require a rebuild of the full rig anymore. You're not broken. Like, your workflow is just more fluid. You can just do things without being stopped in your flow. So yeah, I think that covers it pretty well. I can delete that joint actually, because that was just a test. And yeah, there's a lot more to cover over that. But yeah, that rigging system again is just a prototype. I just wanted to get the idea out there, because I do want more people using that kind of workflow, not only with that like kind of deformation live rest pose thing, which I think is going to become fairly industry standard, but the whole like composability of the workflow. And I'm going to try and open that again. Yes, nice, cool. So yeah, just the whole idea of being able to group nodes together and to just compose your rigs into from very simple components to more and more complex components. Because like right now I just have an IK rig, but I would wrap that into a full arm rig that has like an FK setup, an IK setup, something to blend between both, some twist joints along the arm that I don't have right now. I don't know, maybe some stretching, some as many features as you'd want. All these features could be just nodes that you just pop into bigger components, and then you could group those bigger components into even bigger components. So you could have a full like biped rig that has a leg node, an arm node, a spine node, or whatever. Like, yeah, everything, and just group that into a component. And then whenever you want to build a new biped, you just pop that node in the graph, and then you feed the guides, like I just did for the arm. And you have a rig. And if you need to do modification, add some, I don't know, shoulder pads or like accessories to the character, you can just add more nodes on top of that, and then just group those new nodes on top of that biped group, and just save that as that specific character's node. And then if you do need to rebuild, because like the chances are you will need in a production environment to rebuild the rig, you can just reinstantiate that node and that just gets built for you. So I think that covers everything. Yeah, that's about it. Thank you for watching.